The war ended not with surrender documents but with silence. One by one, alien civilizations stopped attacking human positions and began sending unofficial diplomatic feelers. The Galactic Council disbanded in all but name as member species withdrew. To deal with internal rebellions and economic collapse, Ambassador Kwan So-Hyen found herself in the unusual position of receiving apology delegations from the same species that had demanded human submission 2 years earlier. The aliens who had once threatened humanity with extinction now begged for technological assistance, economic partnerships, and military protection from the chaos they had helped create. The peace that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the rigid hierarchy that had existed for millennia, a loose confederation of independent species began forming around human space. The new order was based on mutual benefit rather than submission, with humans serving as mediators rather than rulers. President Kang's successor, Kim Dong-yuk, established the principle that would guide human galactic policy. Any species could join the human-led alliance, but none would be forced to do so. The freedom to choose one's destiny, which had started the war, became the foundation of galactic peace. The transformation was remarkable. Worlds that had suffered under alien oppression flourished under human protection. Technologies that had been restricted to maintaining elite power were shared freely, leading to unprecedented innovation and prosperity. The galaxy discovered that cooperation produced better results than domination. The former alien powers found themselves adapting to a universe where humans set the rules through example rather than force. Species that had once competed for the Council's approval now competed to demonstrate their value to human civilization. The galaxy's new motto became simple: contribute or be ignored. The story concluded with the establishment of the Terran Commonwealth, a voluntary association of species united by shared values rather than shared subjugation. Humanity had achieved what no galactic power had managed in millions of years. They had created a civilization based on choice, growth, and the fundamental right of sapient beings to determine their own fate. The galaxy learned that sometimes the best way to achieve peace is to walk away from those who mistake negotiation for weakness. And sometimes the greatest victory comes not from conquering your enemies, but from inspiring them to become something better than they ever thought possible. The big meeting room on Nexus Prime Space Station was full of noise and fear. The walls were made of special crystal that could show pictures from across the galaxy today. Those walls showed burning planets and destroyed cities. The smell of different alien creatures mixed together in the air. Some smelled like flowers, others like metal, and some like things humans could not name. Kim Tae-wan stood in the middle of all this chaos. He was tall for a human with black hair and dark eyes that missed nothing. His blue Earth uniform looked very plain next to all the colorful alien clothes and strange body shapes around him. But everyone in the room knew who he was: the human diplomat who never backed down from a fight. The emergency meeting had been called because of terrible news. The Vorthic Empire had attacked again. This time they picked the Million colonies as their target. The Millions were peaceful people who spent their time growing food and making beautiful art. They had never hurt anyone in their long history. Now their worlds were burning. Ambassador Park So-Ra from Milia sat at the long curved table. Her hands shook as she tried to speak. Her people looked almost human, but with silver skin and large purple eyes that showed every emotion. Right now those eyes were full of tears. She spoke through a machine that changed her words into sounds other species could understand. The story she told made everyone in the room feel sick. 3 days ago, black ships had appeared in Million space without warning. The Vortex did not talk or negotiate. They just started shooting. Their weapons turned entire cities into glass. Their soldiers killed anyone who tried to run. The Million defense ships were destroyed in minutes. This was how the Vortex always worked. They would pick a peaceful world and give the same message: surrender now, or we will kill everyone. The choice was simple: give up your freedom or watch your people die. Most species chose to live on their knees rather than die on their feet. The Vorthic commander sat at the other end of the table. He was huge, even sitting down. His body was covered in black scales that looked like metal armor. 6 thick arms ended in claws that could cut through steel. His Face had no expression at all. He looked at the crying million diplomat like she was an insect. Behind the Vorthak commander stood his guards. They wore no armor because their own skin was harder than most metals. Their red eyes glowed in the dim light of the meeting room. Each guard carried weapons that could kill a dozen people with one shot, but their most dangerous weapon was fear. Everyone in the galaxy was afraid of the Vorthak's. Other alien diplomats whispered among themselves. The tall blue Zentari shook their long heads sadly. The small green Quellan made clicking sounds of distress. The floating Nexari dimmed their natural light in respect for the dead. Even the proud Draconi lowered their great heads. They all knew what would happen next. The Galactic Council would make speeches about peace and justice. They would vote to condemn the Vorthak attack. They would send strongly worded messages demanding the Vorthaks stop their war. Then the Vorthaks would ignore everything and continue killing. The pattern had repeated 17 times in the past 100 years. 17 different species had faced the same choice 17 times. The Council had done nothing but talk. 17 civilizations were now extinct or slaves. The Vorthaks grew stronger. With each victory, their empire spread like a disease across the galaxy. No one had ever found a way to stop them. The Vorthak commander stood up slowly. His massive form cast shadows across the crystal floor when he spoke. His voice sounded like grinding metal mixed with the roar of engines. He did not use a translator everyone in the galaxy had learned to understand. Vorthak speech, it was the language of conquest. We have claimed the million worlds for the Empire. He said the weak creatures who lived there could not defend what they had built. So we took it. This is the way of the universe. The strong rule and the weak serve or die. The million people have 3 days to surrender completely. If they do not, we will make their worlds burn until nothing lives. The alien diplomats looked at each other helplessly. Some had faced this same threat before and survived by giving up their freedom. Others had watched their neighbor worlds burn and done nothing. To help, the mathematics were simple. The Vorthaks had the biggest fleet, the best weapons, and no mercy at all. But something different happened this time. Kim Tae-won stepped forward. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. He walked past all the powerful alien diplomats, past their guards and advisors. He stopped right in front of the massive Vorthak commander and looked up at the creature that was 3 times his size. The human diplomat was not afraid. Everyone could see that in his face. He did not shake or sweat or look away. His voice was calm and clear when he spoke, but there was something underneath it. Something that made the other aliens lean forward to listen better. Something that made the Vorthak guards reach for their weapons. Kim Tae-won looked directly into the glowing red eyes of the Vorthak commander. He spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the great meeting hall. His words were simple, but they hit like lightning bolts. We are going to fight, he said. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved or breathed or made any sound at all. The crystal walls stopped showing their pictures. The translation machine stopped humming. Even the air recyclers seemed to pause. The human had just done something that no one in galactic history had ever done before. He had directly challenged the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak commander stared down at Kim Tae-won for a long moment. His 6 arms twitched as if he wanted to tear the human apart right there, but even he seemed shocked by what had just happened. No species had ever openly defied the Vorthaks. Every other race had tried diplomacy or surrender or hiding. Never direct confrontation. The human continued speaking as if he had not just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. You will leave million space immediately. You will return all prisoners and stolen property. You will pay for the damage you have caused, and you will never threaten innocent people again. The Vorthak commander began to laugh. It was a horrible sound, like metal being crushed and engines exploding. He laughed until the whole room shook with the noise. When he finally stopped, he leaned down until his face was close to Kim Tae-won. The human did not back away even when the alien breath washed over him. Little human, he said in a voice full of contempt, your species is new to the galaxy. You have no great fleet, no powerful weapons, no mighty empire. You live on one small world far from here. What makes you think you can fight us? What makes you think we will not burn your earth to ash for this insult? Kim Tae-won smiled. That it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a wolf gives before it attacks, the smile of someone who knows something others do not, because he said we learned a long time ago that some things are worth dying for, and we learned that bullies like you only understand one language, The room erupted in noise as aliens began talking all at once. Some were excited. Others, terrified. The Million Ambassador looked at Kim Tae-won with hope for the first time in days. The other diplomats stared in shock at what they had just witnessed. History had been made in that moment. The age of Vorthic dominance had just been challenged by a species no one had taken seriously. Kim Tae-won turned to face the entire council, his voice carrying over all the chaos. The human race stands with our million friends. We will defend their right to live free. We call upon all peaceful species to join us. It is time to show the galaxy that evil does not win just because it is strong, the Vorthic commander roared in rage. But Kim Tae-won was already walking away. The human diplomat had delivered his message. Now it was time to see if his species could back up their bold words with action. The greatest war in galactic history was about to begin. The message from Nexus Prime reached Earth in less than 12 hours. Admiral Lee Jae-sung sat in his office, high above the Pacific Ocean, reading the coded words that would change everything. The old soldier had gray hair and scars from the last human war, but his eyes were still sharp as steel. He had been waiting for this moment his whole life. Deep beneath the Swiss mountains, Dr. Han Min-ji worked in a laboratory that did not officially exist. For 15 years, she had been creating weapons that broke every rule of civilized warfare. Her hands moved quickly over glowing screens as she activated systems that had been sleeping in the dark. The other alien species had banned such research long ago, calling it too dangerous, but humans had never signed those treaties. Captain Yoon Di-yoon stood on the bridge of the UNSS Incheon, looking out at the stars through thick armored glass. Her ship was ugly compared to the sleek alien vessels. It looked like a flying fortress covered in weapons and armor plates, but every human ship was built the same way. They were made to take damage and keep fighting when prettier ships would have already died. News of Kim Tae-won declaration spread across Earth like wildfire. People gathered in the streets watching the holographic displays that showed the Galactic Council meeting. Children who had never seen an alien before stared at the images of the Vorthic commander. Women and men who remembered the old wars began checking their emergency supplies. The President of United Earth called an emergency session of Parliament. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered in Geneva to hear Admiral Lee Jae-sung explain what humanity was about to face. The numbers were not good. The Vorthics had 200 warships, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth science, but Admiral Lee Jae-sung had studied every Vorthic battle for the past 50 years. He had watched recordings of their victories until he knew their tactics better than his own name. What he had learned was that the Vorthics always fought the same way. They relied on fear and overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy that refused to be scared. Dr. Han Min-ji addressed the Parliament through a secure video link. Her laboratory was too important to leave even for this historic meeting. Behind her, strange machines hummed with power that could crack planets. The weapons she had created were things of nightmare gas that could eat through alien armor in seconds, viruses that could turn enemy computers against their own ships. But the most terrible weapon was one that looked completely harmless, a small metal sphere that could be fired from any human ship. Once it hit an enemy vessel, it would begin eating the hull from the inside. Nothing could stop it except destroying the entire ship. The aliens called such weapons barbaric. Humans called them effective. Captain On Dae-yoon brought her ship to Earth orbit along with 50 other vessels of the human fleet. They were small compared to alien ships, but they were fast and deadly. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Her crew was young men and women who had never fought a real war, but they had trained for this moment since childhood. The alien ambassadors still on Earth sent desperate messages to their homeworlds, begging them not to get involved in the coming war. The Vorthics had never lost a battle. In recorded history, their empire controlled a third of the galaxy. Anyone who helped humanity would become their next target. The mathematics of survival were simple: stay out of the way and hope the Vorthics forgot about you. But something unexpected began to happen. Ships from other worlds started arriving at Earth. Some came openly, like the million cargo vessels that had been converted into weapon platforms. Others came in secret, like the Sishan spy ships that brought advanced technology. The galaxy was watching, and some were choosing sides. Kim Tae-won returned to Earth aboard a fast courier ship. He had done his job at the council, now it was time for others to do theirs. The diplomat who had started a war with words went immediately to meet with Admiral Lee Jae-sung. They had much to discuss. The Vorthik First Fleet was already moving toward Million Space in the deep laboratories. Dr. Han Min-ji worked without sleep. Her assistants were volunteers from 6 different species who had fled their homeworlds to help the cause. The Millions brought their knowledge of energy shields. The Cetians provided rare metals that could cut through anything. The Zephyrians shared stealth technology that could hide entire fleets. The human fleet began its journey toward the battle zone. Captain Yoon Dae-yoon led the way in her fortress ship, followed by destroyers and cruisers that looked like flying weapons. All of them were smaller than a single Vorthik battleship, but size had never been the only thing that mattered in war. Back on Earth, factories that had been building peaceful machines for decades began making instruments of war. Orbital platforms that once grew food now manufactured ammunition. Asteroid mines that had been gathering resources for construction projects started making armor plating. The entire human economy shifted to support the war effort. Admiral Lee Jae-sung studied the intelligence reports from Million Space. The Vorthak fleet was moving slowly, taking time to terrorize the populations of every system they passed. This was their usual pattern: spread fear before the battle began, make the enemy give up before the fighting started. But humans did not scare easily. The message came at midnight Earth time. The Vorthak commander sent a final ultimatum to Kim Tae-won: withdraw all human forces from Million Space or face the destruction of Earth itself. The message included holographic records of planets the Vorthaks had destroyed, worlds turned to glass and ash, entire civilizations wiped out in hours. Kim Tae-won's response was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy: we do not negotiate with murderers, we do not bow to tyrants, we are going to fight and we are going to win. The human race had made its choice. Now the universe would see what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. Dr. Han Min-ji finished her final weapon just as the first reports came in from the battle zone. The Vorthik fleet had reached Million Space. Captain Yoon Dae-yoon and her ships were moving to intercept. The war that would decide the fate of the galaxy was about to begin. Admiral Lee Jae-sung gave the order that every human had been waiting to hear: attack. The battle began at the edge of Million Space, where the darkness between stars suddenly filled with light. The Vorthik First Fleet came out of hyperspace like a black tide. 200 ships of death arranged in perfect formation. Their hulls were dark as midnight, but their weapons glowed with red fire that could burn worlds. Captain Yoon Dae-yoon watched the enemy fleet appear on her screens. Her bridge crew was silent but ready. They had trained for this moment, but training was different from reality. The Vorthak ships were larger than anyone had imagined. Each one looked like a floating mountain covered in weapons that could destroy moons. Commander Seo Hyun-woo led the first wave of human fighters. His small squadron looked tiny against the massive alien fleet: 12 ships against 200. But numbers had never told the whole story in war. His pilots were young, but they had something the aliens did not. They had nothing left to lose. The Vorthaks expected the humans to follow standard galactic warfare rules: keep your distance, use long-range weapons, try to disable rather than destroy, minimize casualties, and fight like civilized beings. But humans had never been very civilized when their friends were in danger. Seo Hyun-woo dove his fighter straight into the heart of the Vorthik formation. His squadron followed him, ignoring the massive weapons that could vaporize them in seconds. They flew between the giant ships, dodging energy beams that lit up space like deadly fireworks. Their small guns targeted weak points that bigger ships could not reach. The Vorthak commander watched in confusion as the human fighters acted like they were already dead. No rational species would attack in such a reckless way. His ships were designed to fight enemies who valued their own lives, but these humans seemed to care more about hurting the enemy than staying alive. Lieutenant Nam Ji-hai was the first human to die in the war, but she did not die quietly. Her fighter was hit by a Vorthik energy beam that tore through her ship like paper, but instead of ejecting or trying to escape, she aimed her dying craft at the biggest enemy ship she could see. Her final words echoed across the battle channel for every human life: we take 10 of yours. Her ship struck the Vorthik dreadnought main gun and exploded. The massive weapon that could destroy cities was suddenly silent. Commander Seo Hyun-woo smiled grimly as he watched the explosion. The aliens were learning that humans did not fight to win, they fought to hurt the enemy as much as possible. Captain Yoon Deun brought her ship into battle range. Her fortress vessel was built like a flying castle with weapons pointing in every direction the aliens targeted. Her ship with enough firepower to crack a moon, but the human armor held her ship kept fighting even as pieces of hull flew off into space. Dr. Han Min-ji Forbidden's weapons began to show their true horror missiles that released clouds of metal-eating gas struck Vortex ships and began dissolving their hulls from the outside. Computer viruses hidden in communication signals turned enemy weapons against their own allies. Biological agents designed to attack alien nervous systems made Vorthak crew sick and confused. The tide of battle began to shift when Captain Yoon Deun executed a maneuver that had never been tried before. She ordered her crew to overload the ship reactor and ram the Vorthak flagship. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, the invincible Vorthak command ship was nothing but glowing debris. Admiral Lee Jae-sung coordinated the battle from his command ship far behind the fighting. He had studied Vorthak tactics for decades, looking for weaknesses that no one else had seen. What he discovered was that the aliens had never fought an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. The Vorthaks began to panic as their perfect formation fell apart. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Weapons that should have missed found their targets anyway. Tactics that had worked for centuries suddenly failed. The aliens realized they were not fighting a normal enemy commander. Seo Hyun-woo led his surviving fighters in one final attack. His squadron was down to 3 ships, but they still had weapons and they still had targets. He picked the largest remaining Vorthak vessel and began his attack run. His guns were almost empty, but he had one weapon left, his ship itself. The Vorthak commander tried to rally his fleet, but it was too late. Half his ships were destroyed or disabled. The others were retreating in disorder. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated the Vorthak First Fleet. The cost was terrible. 70% of the human ships were gone, but they had one. Captain Yoon Deun did not survive to see the victory. Her ship had been destroyed when she rammed the enemy flagship, but her sacrifice had broken the back of the Vorthak attack. Her crew became heroes across the galaxy. The woman who had turned her ship into a weapon to save her friends, the surviving Vorthak ships, limped away from the battle zone. Their commander sent a message to his emperor. The humans were not like other species. They fought like demons and cared nothing for their own lives. The First Fleet was destroyed. The Empire would need to send everything they had to defeat these mad creatures. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. Ambassador Park So Ra wept tears of joy as she watched the battle recordings. Her people would live to see another day. The impossible had happened. The Vorthak war machine had been stopped by a species most aliens considered primitive, but the celebration was brief. Everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Vorthak Empire would not accept defeat. They would send their second fleet, twice as large as the first. The real war was just starting, and humanity had already paid a terrible price for their first victory. Kim Tae-won stood before the reformed Galactic Council, his dress uniform replaced by battle armor. The diplomat who had started the war with words now had to help finish it with weapons. His message to the galaxy was simple. We told you we were going to fight now, you know we meant it. The Vorthak commander who had laughed at human threats was dead. His flagship was scattered atoms floating in space, but his empire lived on. And they were very, very angry. The Second Fleet was already being assembled. The largest war armada in galactic history was preparing to teach humanity the price of defiance. The recordings of the battle at Nillion Space played on every screen in the galaxy. Beings who had never heard of humans watched in amazement as the small Earthships destroyed vessels 10 times their size. The impossible had happened. The Vorthak Empire had been defeated in open battle for the first time in centuries. Ambassador Park So Ra stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Her silver skin glowed with excitement as she showed the battle footage to representatives from dozens of worlds. The peaceful millions had found their voice at last. Your human friends have shown us that bullies can be beaten, she said. The question now is, what will the rest of us do? The news hit different species in different ways. The Proud Draconi, who had once ruled their own empire, began to remember what it felt like to fight for freedom. The small Quellan realized that size did not matter as much as courage the floating. Nexari dimmed their lights in respect for the human sacrifice, but also began to glow brighter with hope. Dr. Han-Min-ji worked day and night in her hidden laboratory. The victory had cost humanity most of its fleet she needed to build new weapons faster than ever before her team had grown from a dozen humans to include volunteers from 6 different species. The millions brought their advanced manufacturing. The Cetians provided rare metals, the Zephyrians shared stealth technology, but the celebration was short-lived. Emperor Vorth himself took command of the Second Fleet. The ruler of the Vorthic Empire had not personally led a battle in 50 years. His appearance meant that humanity had made the most powerful being in the galaxy. Very angry, the Second Fleet was twice as large as the first 400 ships of destruction were preparing to make Earth into a dead world. Captain Choi Yun SCO took command of the rebuilt human fleet. She was younger than Captain Yoon Dae-yoon had been, but she had learned from watching the first battle. The new human ships were faster and deadlier, incorporating lessons written in the blood of their fallen comrades. Her flagship was the UNSS Seoul. Armed with a weapon she called the Democracy Cannon, the galaxy began to choose sides. Some worlds declared neutrality, hoping the storm would pass them by. Others began sending secret aid to humanity. The million agricultural ships were converted into weapons platforms. The Cetian spy network began sharing intelligence about Vorthak fleet movements even. The neutral Zephyrians started providing stealth technology. Kim Tae-wan traveled to every major world trying to build an alliance. He spoke to crowded assemblies and secret meetings. His message was always the same: the Vortex would not stop with humanity today. They come for Earth. Tomorrow they will come for you. The only safety is in standing together. The Vorthak response was swift and brutal. 3 more worlds that had shown sympathy for humanity were attacked without warning. Their populations were given the same choice: submit or die. 2 worlds surrendered immediately. The third chose to fight and was burned to ash within hours. The message was clear: help the humans and face extinction. Emperor Vorth broadcast his own message to the galaxy. From his massive flagship, the creature was ancient, even by Vorthic standards. His scales were black as space itself, and his 6 arms ended in claws that dripped with the blood of 1,000 worlds. He spoke in the old language that all species understood, the language of fear. The human insects have stung us, he said in a voice like grinding stone. But now they will learn why we rule the galaxy. We will burn their world to glass. We will hunt down every human in space. We will make their name a curse that frightens children for 1,000 generations. They dared to defy us, now they will pay. But something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. The Vorthic threats that had always worked before were having a different effect. Young beings on dozens of worlds watched the human battle recordings and began to ask questions. Why should we be afraid? Why should we kneel? Why should we let bullies rule our lives? On the industrial world of Metron, the workers went on strike. They refused to build weapons for the Vorthic war machine. On the agricultural world of Verdant, the farmers stopped sending food to Vorthic colonies. On the mining world of Asteroid Base 12, the miners sealed their tunnels and sent their ore to human worlds. Instead, the rebellion was small at first, just a few worlds refusing to cooperate. But it spread like fire through dry grass. The Vortex had ruled through fear for so long. They had forgotten that fear could turn into anger, anger could turn into courage, and courage was contagious. Dr. Han-Min-ji made a breakthrough that would change the war her team had been studying. Captured Vorthic technology looking for weaknesses. What they found was something no one expected. The Vortex had never faced an enemy that fought with emotion instead of logic. Their battle computers could not predict irrational behavior. Captain Choi Yun SEO tested the new weapons in secret. Her democracy cannon was based on human principles, overwhelming firepower applied without mercy. The weapon could punch through any known armor, and the explosion would take out everything within 1,000 kilometers. It was designed to make the enemy afraid. The Second Fleet began its journey toward human space. 400 ships of the line, accompanied by twice as many support vessels. It was the largest war fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Emperor Vorth had committed everything to destroying humanity. His empire would live or die on this single battle. Kim Tae-wan returned to Earth to help coordinate the defense. The diplomat who had started the war with words now had to help finish it with actions. He stood in the war room with Admiral Lee Jae-sung and the other human commanders looking at tactical displays that showed the approaching enemy. The mathematics were simple. Humanity had 50 ships. The Vortex had 400. Human technology was centuries behind. Vortex science human forces were scattered across a dozen systems while the enemy came as a single unstoppable hammer, but humans had something the aliens did not. They had nothing left to lose. Admiral Lee Jae-sung gave his final briefing to the human fleet commanders. "We are outnumbered 8-1, he said. "We are outgunned by weapons we cannot match. We are facing an enemy that has never lost a war, but we have advantages they do not understand. We fight for our homes, our families, our freedom, and we do not know how to surrender." The galaxy watched and waited as the two forces moved toward each other. Some species prayed to their gods for humanity to win, others prepared to surrender to the Vortex if the humans lost. Most simply hoped to survive what was coming. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. Emperor Vorth studied the intelligence reports about human capabilities. His advisors assured him that victory was certain. The humans had shown courage in the first battle, but courage alone could not overcome such odds. The Second Fleet would crush them like insects. Then the real punishment would begin. But deep in his ancient heart, Emperor Vorth felt something he had not experienced in centuries: doubt. The humans had done the impossible once. Could they do it again? His claws tapped nervously on his command throne as his fleet moved through space toward a small blue world that dared to defy the galaxy. The Second Battle of Seoul began when the Vorthic fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Emperor Vorth had brought 400 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The black vessels formed a wall of death stretching across space, their weapons charging with red fire that could crack worlds. But something was wrong. The Vortex had expected to find a broken human civilization ready to beg for mercy. Instead, they found the solar system turned into a fortress. Every asteroid had been converted into a weapons platform. Every moon bristled with defensive systems, and the combined fleets of 12 different species waited in battle formation. Captain Choi Yoon-seo stood on the bridge of her flagship Unsol, watching the enemy fleet approach. Her democracy cannon was charged and ready. The weapon violated every treaty on civilized warfare, but humans had never been very civilized when defending their families. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you cornered a predator species. Lieutenant Colonel Park Jin-woo commanded the ground forces on Mars, where Vortex shock troops had landed expecting easy victory. What they found instead were human soldiers who had studied every form of warfare their species had ever developed, trenches that would have impressed the generals of old Earth. Urban combat tactics learned from 100 different wars. The Vortex ground troops were larger and stronger than humans. Their armor could stop most weapons. Their training was perfect, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to follow the rules. Human soldiers used explosives as hand weapons. They turned city buildings into death traps. They fought from sewers and rooftops and anywhere the enemy did not expect. The main space battle raged across the entire solar system. Vorthak battleships, the size of cities, exchanged fire with human destroyers no bigger than office buildings. The mathematics should have been simple. The larger ships should have won easily, but the humans had learned to fight dirty. Dr. Han Min-Ji weapons turned the battle into a nightmare for the Vortex. Computer viruses spread through their fleet, turning their own systems against them. Biological weapons designed to attack alien nervous systems made entire crews sick and confused. Metal-eating gas dissolved their hulls from the outside, while kinetic weapons punched through their armor. Emperor Vorth watched in growing rage as his perfect formation fell apart. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Their weapons were primitive but deadly. Their tactics made no sense, but somehow worked. His flagship took hit after hit from the human democracy cannon, but his thick armor held on Mars. Lieutenant Colonel Park Jin-woo led his troops in a fighting retreat through the ruins of New Seoul. The Vorthic ground forces were winning, but at a terrible cost. Every building had to be taken room by room. Every street was a killing ground. The humans fought like they were defending their own homes, because they were the tide of battle turned when,